What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use to tighten up my mixes and make them sound less muddy and cluttered, and yeah, just make things more punchy and just like cleaned up sounding. So it's actually going to be a few different things I'm going to show you guys, but first I'm going to play you what it sounds like before I add these things, and then I'll kind of explain what I'm doing, and I'll kind of go through what I did, and then I'll add everything. You can hear how it sounds afterwards. So this is what it sounds like pre-process with nothing on it. Alright, so now I'm going to go through the steps that I went through to basically tighten it up. And when I originally mixed this, I didn't do this all at once, but this is just what I did throughout the mixing process to make things just sound better. So first thing I'm going to do, and this is what I normally start with, is I go down to the guitars, and one important thing when you're tightening a mix is just cutting out like all unessential bass frequencies. And even if something sounds good soloed, having it a little thinner so just the best parts of that track shine through might be what you need to do. It's worth trying. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do right now to the guitar tracks, and this is using SSL channel. I'm just right here on this bass knob right here. I'm going to show you, this is what I did. So here we go. So it's a pretty massive cut, and it might seem kind of ridiculous to like cut that far, you know what I mean? But if you actually listen to it with the whole mix, what it's going to do is it's going to allow the bass and the kick drum and a little bit of the snare and whatnot to cut through better without muddying everything. So you're sacrificing some of that guitar beefiness to beef up everything else and just make everything else crisper. So that's one thing to look into if your mixes are sounding a little muddy. Try going in. This is something that I never did, and I started doing it. I'm like, wow, my mixes don't sound like Butthole, anymore. Not as much like Butthole. They still sound a little bit like Butthole, but what I did is I went through, took that bass knob, boop, I just dropped it right down. It sounds kind of thin, but let's listen to it in the whole mix real quick. Turn it up. So right now things sound a little thin, right? But it is making things sound clearer. So trust me on this. If you go into your mixes and you cut down those unessential bass frequencies of your guitar, and you kind of, even if you go in and you boost, look at how much I boosted the highs, just allow that aggression through the guitars to come out a lot more, and it will make things just sound a lot more crystal clear. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the kick drum, and we're going to mess with this a little bit. One thing, I'm going to show you guys two things. One thing is this EQ right here. So with this EQ, which is not enabled, I'm about to enable it, I cut out some of the lows, I cut out a lot of the mids, and this is going to make everything sound tighter. You're going to get rid of a lot of these mids where the guitar and the bass is going to sit, and you're going to increase the highs, which is going to keep the clickiness, So let's see what it sounds like without this EQ, and then let's see what it sounds like with the EQ. Alright, let's hear it. Nice, man. Sick, bro. I think it sounds pretty cool. Once I started doing this, my kick drum game got a lot better. This wasn't from all the fancy stuff that I messed with. It wasn't from any of that fancy crap. It was really just from learning how to EQ a kick drum correctly. And so with this particular sample, I cut out 9 dB out of on 334. I cut out 6 dB at 692. These are kind of things where I just kind of went dip, 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 dip. I wasn't really thinking about where or what was going on. I was more using my ears, and that's what you want to do. Pull up an EQ and just carve out some of those mids and watch how it makes it sit in the mix. Another thing I did was increase the highs too by a bit so that it still is present in the mix. That's where a lot of the presence in that punch is coming from. One more thing is a little bit of lows increased too, just a tad, you know, to give it more punch too, so you're not losing too much when you're cutting all those mids. Last thing I'm going to do before we play it is this C4. And what this is it's a multi-band compressor, so it's compressing just certain frequencies. So right now I bypassed these 3, so it's compressing just the low end. If you guys don't have this, or you don't have access to this, it's not going to ruin the world. It's not going to kill anything. You're still going to sound good. And this is just like kind of icing on the cake to help keep those frequencies in check. I'll show you what it sounds like if you play it with this. Now, I just enabled it. This is without it. This is with it. Just kind of cleans it up. Very subtle. But what you notice is I have my range all the way down, attack all the way up, release all the way down, and then I kind of set the threshold so it's just below where the waveform is hitting. A lot of times you can go higher or lower. Just sound it out, figure it out. This is where I left it, like this. So it's just kind of brushing down. It's kind of it's actually compressing it more than I normally do on this, but it sounded good, so I left it. So now let's listen to the mix with this added on. So now we've cut out lows on the guitars, and we've EQ'd and compressed the kick drum. That's all we've done so far. Let's listen to how it's affected the mix. To me, it sounds a lot just clearer. It's not necessarily heavier, but it's just clearer, and people are gonna appreciate you a little more for making it sound like that, because when you play it in a car or whatever, it's not gonna sound like a mudfest, you know. It's gonna sound less like a mudfest. So that's the point of this. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna show you guys is probably the most important thing, which is the bass guitar. And honestly, the bass guitar probably does sound better on its own without doing these things to it. But with doing these things to it, it makes it sound very tight. And that's kind of what I'm going for, and that's what's allowing the mix to just not sound muddy. You know what I mean? So you kind of got to pick. Do you want the bass to sound really overly bassy and fat, or do you want the mix to sound clearer, or do you want to have the best of both worlds? You know what I mean? So you want to try and find a balance. So I have 3 bass tracks. They're copied. This is the main one. I'll play you it. It's just a MIDI bass. It's not a real one. I'm going to enable the EQ on it now. Let's listen to it with the EQ that I did. I cut at 141, and I cut a little of the highs. And this, obviously, I just wrecked the bass frequencies, right? So I wouldn't leave this. This isn't the end of the tone. So now there's no bass left. This is just the main track. I copied it to another one, and this one is a sub bass track. Let's listen to this with nothing added to it. So now what we're going to do, this is coming from the main one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enable these FX, and what I have on here is EQ cut at 100. It's cutting everything above 100, and so that's kind of making up for all the frequencies that the other one cut out. So now it sounds like this. Hold on, it sounds like this now. So now it sounds kind of just like a sub bass. And now I added guitar stomp to it, and this is just adding a little more oomph to it. Let's hear how this sounds. See how it just gives it a little more of that chunkiness. If you guys don't have that, it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? You could probably, I don't know if this would work, but you could try like copying it again and then just pitch shifting it. If you have like repitcher or whatever on Reaper, you may be able to do that, and then just turn that way down so it's kind of layered. You could try that. But I'm using this, so. But if you guys try that version, that might work too, and let me know if it works. The next thing I added is MaxxBass, and this is just to give it a little more oomph too. Some artificial bass frequencies. Awesome. Next thing we're going to do is, this isn't really adding to the tightness, but I might as well show it. I have one more bass track too, so there's 3 of them in total, and this one is has an EQ on it and distortion, and the EQ is cutting at 237 and 4,780, and then a little bit at 3,000, and this one is just a little bit of crunch. This is just to retain some of that crunch. So let's listen to them all together. This is all the bass tracks together now. So doesn't sound bad, but there's one more thing that I did, which is I added EQ to the master for the bass as well. So here it is. This EQ is just cutting out more lows, and it's carving out some of those mids to allow the guitars and the drums, everything to just sit better. You want to just be very careful and just kind of just scoop out things that sound a little off and whatnot, and you're gonna kind of make the mix sound more and more polished. So now we've done everything that I was going to do to the individual tracks. So let's listen to it together. There's still one more step, but this is what it sounds like now. So now the bass is very contained. It's not gone, but it's just significantly quieter. So if we turn it up a little bit, let's see what that sounds like. Let's just listen to it. So it's still present, but it's not destroying the mix. If anything, the mix sounds thin now, right? So this is the final step. This is usually the last thing I do to finish up, like tightening it up, because now that everything's tight and contained, you want to now boost the frequencies again so that everything good is shining through, right? So the last thing I do is I go on my master, and this is probably one of the most important parts. You go on the master. You could probably just boost the lows on their own, but I like to use MaxxBass, and I'm going to enable it, and it's just going to watch how it changes the bass frequencies. Now we're going to add in all that punch again, except everything's tighter because you just cleaned everything up. So let's hear how it sounds now. Get rid of it. So yeah, that's it for my tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I have a page called Dark Cabin Studios now. As you can see, I'm in a dark cabin. If you guys want to follow that page, I'd really appreciate it, or like it. If you guys have any suggestions for anything I could change with the video or future videos, or any ideas, just let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's it for this video. Yeah, have a good one.